Here we go. Hi, Malia.
Hi.
How are you?
Doing pretty well. There's a lot, like I was saying, and I think things that people can relate to. But currently, my mom is battling cancer, and we're kind of in a rough spot.
Mm.
Um, but I did want to mention, and I think that all people should be doing this, the normalizing of crying, how it gets out. So, like, I guess literally just as you cry, it releases all these toxins. And they think that there is some special reason that when you cry and it comes down this way, that it stays on your face so people can see it and comfort you.
Wow.
Yes.
I'm really
Yes.
sorry about your mom, and I know we've spoken about it in the past, and it's really interesting how there's things that have happened or research from how we should react to things, and it's not okay to cry, and people tell us, why are you crying? She's in a much better place, and they come up with their uh, opinions, and I'll use that
Yeah.
loosely, or try to give you advice. And I know that you and I have talked a lot about how we all may have experienced similar journeys, but everybody's journey is their own,
Yes.
and how important it is for us to really live our own journey
Yes.
versus trying to kind of put our own spin on how we should feel or not feel.
Yeah.
And so,
Yes. I'm definitely somebody that used to, when anyone asks, and even at the beginning of the call, when you're like, "Oh, how are you?" And I always would be like, "Ah, great," and just like laugh on that smile. And I've just been trying to normalize, depending on what people have going on in their lives. Like, it's okay not to be okay, or to be a little, have an off day, or it's really, I think, um, a sign of strength to be vulnerable. I know last time we were talking about vulnerability
mhm.
and how it really can be a superpower.
Oh
But I
yeah.
think if we're not vulnerable, this is a real thing that happened to me this last week, which I thought was very heartwarming, and it wouldn't have ever happened if I hadn't
Mhm.
expressed my emotions.
Mhm.
I was at Trader Joe's a few weeks back.
Mhm.
And at Trader Joe's, I don't know if other people are familiar, but at the market, as you're going through the checkout person will ask you, "How are you?" And the checkout person, she was very nice, and she was like, "How are you?" And I was gonna start with my regular old, "I'm great." But instead, I was like, my mom has terminal cancer, and it's in a very dark place. And I cried. And it
Wow.
was like such an unusual thing. Again, I used to be the kind of person when I was a kid, like, if I'm gonna cry, I'm gonna go like hide in a closet and get under
Yeah.
some clothes, and
Yeah.
like, again, kind of like what I said, because you never know, people's responses might be
Mhm.
crying. Or I think a long time it used to be like, "Oh, if you're crying, then I'll give you something to cry about,"
Oh
or
yeah.
you know
Oh yeah.
was so, like, natively received. And so the checkout person at Trader Joe's came and gave me a big hug.
Oh,
And it
Malia.
was very nice. And then 3 weeks later or so, I was leaving that same Trader Joe's in the neighborhood, and I saw that a checkout person had no line. So I was like, "Yay!" So I went to their checkout aisle, and it was that same woman
Wow.
who had given me the hug before. But I had told myself before going to Trader Joe's that I was not going to cry today at Trader Joe's, that that was like a one time thing. And so she asked how my mom was doing, and I told her that she really is doing, very poorly. And I said, "But look, I'm not going to cry at Trader Joe's again." So I had her tell me all about her. I was like, "Why don't you tell me about you and what's going
Oh.
on so I don't cry?" And as I was leaving, she really stealthily talked to her manager and told me that Trader Joe's wanted to give me whatever flowers that I wanted to go pick out something, and that they
Oh
would
my
give me these
gosh.
flowers like free of charge, just because, of everything that was going on with me. And I had a
Oh,
friend
Malia.
recently who's a very nice person, but who'd seen something terrible had happened at her workplace, where she felt like, oh, like, are there really kind or great people? And I felt like, with my experience with the Trader Joe checkout person, there are really nice people out there, really good people. And like, you know, I feel like in a weird way, right, by me crying, a little bit my faith was restored in humanity a bit, of like letting the emotions out and
Yeah.
letting things be as they are. And yeah, so I definitely do want to normalize crying and try to be a good role model for my sons of you
You
don't just
know,
have to stuff it all down.
it's true. And all of that story started with a how are you today? Right.
Yeah,
And I was just talking to a client this morning, and she had gone through some significant loss in her life. And someone asked her, a friend of hers asked her, well, how are you? And she's kind of just like you told her, hey,
yeah,
I'm feeling really sad. I'm missing, so and so, and I'm feeling really bad. And the person that she knew told her, well, don't you think that that's like enough? Because, they've been gone X amount of years already. And, don't you think that you should like be better now? And it's really interesting to me because as we were talking, I thought about that question, how are you? And
yeah,
we make it such a rhetorical question where we don't really want to know in normal human contact. We're not really inviting the person to truly tell us how they are. It's
yes,
almost like it's just a, hey, how are you? And you're supposed to respond, I'm great,
yeah.
even though
Everything's perfect over here.
everything's falling apart, or
Yeah,
we're not feeling the best. And I was recently in a class that finished, and there was a philosophical side to it. And it was they had us chart our emotional line throughout six
yeah,
weeks and our learning line throughout six
yeah,
weeks. And when I looked at those emotional lows, it
yeah.
was really when the learning was at its highest point. It was the
Ah,
strangest thing for me. And
yeah,
it kind of talking like, okay, there was a lot of doubt in those valleys. It's
yeah,
when I really applied and learned more. So my
yeah,
learning had a peak. And I'd like to apply that to kind of that question, right? Where we
yeah,
understand and say, okay, how are we doing? And be able to say, really mean it, like really draw out the person's emotions or their true feelings. Because sometimes we need to get that off our chest, whether it's
yeah.
with somebody we know or a stranger, just to be able to speak it. It makes you feel better.
It does. I mean,
It makes you feel better.
I was hearing a story today, as I was telling you when I went to the grief grief yoga, right? The somatic experiencing of grief, feeling it in your body and just letting it. But in that program, they were telling about a woman who, as like a teenager in World War II,
Mhm.
was brought to one of the Nazi concentration camps,
Oh, okay.
and that she would always state, right, if you don't like, you have to express it, otherwise you're going to get depressed,
Yeah.
and she would just, I guess, use the slogan, express it, don't depress it.
Yeah.
of making yourself truly. And I think that there is such a power in owning our stories or being real with other people about what is really going on with us.
Mhm.
Like you were
Yeah,
saying, right, about the woman that you have as a client, grief is not linear,
it's not.
it's
It's
not like,
not.
oh,
Mm-mm. But, there's one thing that I kind of want to add to that because I think human nature is really, we want to try to help our fellow humans, like overcome your sadness because I think there's a certain stigma out there where you have like a certain grieving period and then it's over. It's
yes,
done. But I'd love to be able to also normalize where we allow our friends and family to feel what they're going to feel and where their vulnerability and their sadness and it not make it awkward for those of us that are not going through that, but just be able to be supportive, um, and not necessarily go out there and make it feel like you have to fix us. Like,
yes,
we don't need fixing, or we're just kind of going through the emotional that that journey of grief. And you're right, it's not linear, and we're going to have our good days and we're going to have our bad days. And just because we're crying or we want to express a little sadness doesn't invite, at least in my opinion, like, hey, have you tried so and so, or you really need to try this, and this worked for me. It's just sometimes I feel like you just need to let me feel, and then I'll ask you, can you help me, or is there something that you can do for me, um, in order to invite that conversation? Because more often than not, I just need to offload a little bit.
yes, yes. I know we were talking about that, and where I think that's just so powerful
Yeah.
when someone is speaking about what they are experiencing.
Mhm.
I have a friend that she asks, right, do you want to vent or do you want me to problem solve?
I love
And
that.
I feel like it's such like sometimes people want to vent and sometimes they want to problem solve, but you kind of let the other person, right, lead in that way of what
Yeah.
they actually really need because maybe
Yeah.
they just need to vent, and by us trying to problem solve these things for them, that's not really helpful.
I
It's
really like
not.
that. I think I'm going to try to adopt that, into my daily, just, interactions,
Yeah.
because it's something that's so important, I think, as we try to kind of normalize emotions and normalize. I say that by saying, I want to normalize the crying, or I want to
Yeah.
normalize the grief. I want to normalize all of that. So it's a point where people don't feel uncomfortable because I'm feeling sad, or a feeling of I'm inadequate because I cry, or I need that fixing, whatever that seems or whatever that is to that other person. So I think I'm going to have to start to adopt that into my interactions because I feel like if I'm the one that practices it, then others may be prone to practice that too, right? So
Yeah.
that we can be in an environment where we ask, do you want to vent or do you want to problem solve? Because setting that expectation up front lets me know my role as the one that's listening, right? The one that's
Yes.
there. So, yeah, I
I
appreciate that, Malia.
I'm here for it 100%, right?
Yeah.
Normalizing the full spectrum of emotions.
Mhm.
And, uh, so many times when I was younger, I would just, while I think trying to be helpful, be like, oh, yeah, let me tell you this story about me. And like, it's just so much easier, I think, it's much better, right, for the other person to really have the floor in that way, to be
Yeah.
really real and to be able to get the kind of support that they're really looking for at that time. I just think
Yeah.
it is so important. Well,
Yeah.
Deanna, let me lead us through a moment
Yes.
of silence,
Yes.
and just having a moment of pause, of quiet, peaceful pause, whether we've had a stressful day or a really happy day, depending on whatever we're needing. It's always so great to have that moment of pause.
I agree. I agree. Here we go.
I'm going to put my hand over my heart. You're welcome to do that as well. Hmm. Thank you so much, Deanna, for meeting and talking with me today. And thank you for everyone else that was able to join us. We really appreciate you being here. We know that we all have very busy lives.
Mhm.
And I think, as the one takeaway, I think, for me, because I don't always do it, even though I love it when my friend does it, I'm really going to try to ask, do you want to vent or do you want me to problem solve? You know?
That's super powerful. I really do. I think if more of us put that into practice, it would change our human interactions so much, you know?
Yeah.
So I really appreciate you sharing everything, Malia. And my heart is with you as you go through this journey with your mom. And we are all here for you, you
Thank
know?
you.
So you
Thank you,
take care of
Deanna.
yourself, and we're here. It's so interesting how it all circles back. And when we came up with this name of Here to Bloom, like, we really mean that, right? Because we need our community to be able to bloom. And that lotus flower is what blooms even in the mud. And so it's so important for us to remember that we can do that even in moments of difficulty. So thank you for sharing
Yes.
that, Malia, and being vulnerable with that.
Yes. Yeah. Well,
So
thank you, Deanna. I
thank
hope
you.
you have a wonderful rest of your day
You
to
too,
you and to
Malia.
everyone.
You too. You
Thank
take care of
you.
yourself, okay?
Okay.